Hey everyone, I'm Boom.
I'm Spice. We're back again. We took another break because I suddenly got COVID the moment that we planned on starting up our recording again. And in that downtime, we had an idea that we could record episodes of like just discussing stuff we've read that wouldn't fit the podcast necessarily or that won't be touched on the podcast yet. And that's what we're talking about today. The first episode of our new series, Recent Reads.
Recent Reads. Yep, we, believe it or not, we read a lot of books outside of podcast scope.
Too many.
when we're not reading podcast books, we're still reading.
Exactly. It's crazy. It's bananas.
So this is going to be our outlet where we can talk about the goings-on between the episodes.
Exactly. Yeah, believe it or not, some books aren't podcast material. It's not suitable for this audience. And Sheldon's going crazy. What's he up to? Is he looking for something? Oh, he's trying to catch his tail, isn't he?
He is.
Oh, you think he'll get it?
He almost. Yeah,
he got a hand on it. You think it hurts to like grab your tail like that?
I don't know.
I don't think he'd keep doing it if it did.
It's like his tail messes with him. Like, it moves as if it's trying to mess with him. Maybe that's subconscious.
I think it has a mind of its own.
Yeah.
I used to get annoyed when I was a little kid because I could see my nose. Like I could just see it. I can see it like as we're talking. And it bugged me to no end. And then if I get sick, sometimes my uvula will swell and I'll feel it on my tongue. And that'll bug me. That'll bug me real bad. What's a bugaboo of yours that you've got that's like the tail?
It's with the glasses I'm wearing right now, or those like it.
Yeah.
Seeing the edges of them.
Yeah,
I don't often notice it, but with these thinner frames I can. My normal everyday ones are a little bit bigger because just for that reason, so I don't have to look at the frame so much.
All right. Yeah, that's not advice at all. They're fun little personal anecdotes.
Now they know one more bit of personal information.
Exactly. Yeah, you live in a house.
Boom has a house and wears glasses.
Yep, exactly. It's a
We are
house
narrowing it down
with doors and windows and a roof, and he does in fact have glasses, and he reads books. All right, Boom. What's your first piece of literature you want to inundate us about?
All right, my first edition of Recent Reads is titled The Final Empire. It's the first book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. And it follows the story of Vin as she learns about allomancy, the power system in the book, and overthrowing the Lord Ruler, or so she hopes.
Boom actually gifted me a copy of Mistborn, which I'm very thankful for. I'm gonna have to get him back at some point. It's I got him some books for his birthday.
You did.
Exactly. I got him a little book of poetry from Billy Collins and this other weird nondescript book of poetry. And then
I didn't even know where to put that on the shelf. It's just a book of poetry by several. Yeah. I don't know. I have it organized by last name.
I got you that collection from Raymond Carver. Solid selections. Love me some Raymond Carver.
That's first and last on my shelf.
Exactly. But it's longer than my typical read. It's like 600 pages. And this is not my usual forte because I'm not a series guy generally. So it'll be exciting to get into some new territory, break some new ground. So the only spoiler I want to know is, did you like it?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a super cool magic system that he uses, and some pretty cool ideas that you don't find often. Like, he avoids a lot of fantasy tropes in here, and it's pretty cool. It's really interesting. It's pretty It's got a cool, like, eerie, grim kind of overlay on the whole thing. Very neat.
Fantastic. Now, boom. Look at the cover for my selection. Doesn't that look cool? Right.
It looks cool.
Right?
I like the way they do that with the X.
Exactly. It's called No Exit and Three Other Plays by Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre. The less intelligible it is, the more accurate your pronunciation. Judd, why don't you give it a swing, boom?
let me read it.
It is not Jean-Paul Sartre.
Not Jean-Paul Sartre. That was gonna be.
It's not it.
That was gonna be my first guess. All right, how did you say it, just so I can get a bear?
Jean-Paul Sartre.
Jean-Paul Sartre.
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 Yeah, that's about how you say it. He's a
Cool.
contemporary of Albert Camus. Who we will cover on the podcast someday. I'm not sure about Jean-Paul Sartre, because Albert Camus is a staple of a lot of reading lists. Like The Stranger, tons of people teach that in school. The Fall, The Plague,
totally realistic.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Jean-Paul Sartre is a little more like dense. It's harder to read Jean-Paul Sartre. He's not very forthright about what he means or why you should be reading what you're reading. In my experience, this is the first time I've read him. This is about 280 pages, about 300 pages, which is a little longer than I like. I'm a 200-page guy. That's around where I find the most enjoyment. And listen to this blurb on the back and tell me if this sounds interesting to you. In these 4 plays, Jean-Paul Sartre, the great existentialist, novelist, and philosopher, displays his mastery of the drama. No Exit is an unforgettable portrayal of hell. The Flies is a modern reworking of the Electra Orestes story. Dirty Hands is about a young intellectual born or torn between theory and praxis. The Respectful Prostitute is a scathing attack on American racism. How does that sound?
That sounds pretty cool.
What if I told you, like, maybe 1 to a half, like 2.5 of these out of the 4 are good. Like,
Yeah.
It's not great. No Exit is okay. And I think I like it better as a thought experiment, because it's 3 people locked in a room that they can't get out of, with a buzzer on the door that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. That can let them out, but, it's hell. You're generally not going to get out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's a point where the door opens and they don't leave.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Because
see.
they're afraid of what's outside,
Mhm.
but they also hate each other. And they're all poking at each other, like trying to get under each other's skin. It's weird. That one's okay. I like No Exit. The Flies, I feel like I had to know, because I know some Greek mythology, Orestes and Electra. I know the people involved, like King Emig. I knew I was going to mispronounce it when I got on here. Let me see. Well, there's Agastheus. That one I didn't know. Agathias. There's also discussions of Agamemnon, who I did know, and Clytemnestra, who I knew. So I wasn't totally unfamiliar, but it was not like something I knew like the back of my hand, and I think that's who that was for. Because there's not a whole lot of introductions to characters.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean.
I imagine if you staged this, you pared it down significantly, because there's a lot of, I don't know how much of this is the translation, but just pitter-patter. Like, it's not very direct. It feels like he keeps going back and forth. And that's the case with Dirty Hands, where this guy ponders seemingly endlessly assassinating this member of the Communist Party in Russia, and it's the ending's really good, but it feels unearned. So it's all right. It's better than The Flies, but not by a whole lot. That's why I gave The Flies like a half. I like the ending of The Flies too, but. And then The Respectful Prostitute. They say the N-word so much, dude. It's all over it. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if that was the translator making choices and liberties, or if that was Sartre's initial writing. Clearly, it's meant to be ironic in like a Mel Brooks sort of way,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't make it any more palatable for me. So it's all right. Don't go out of your way to read Jean-Paul Sartre. At least his fiction. I've never read his philosophy. So that's my first book out of the way. What's your next one?
All right. Okay. Now, I'm still deciding between my next one. I have both of the copies, so it's really just, it's going to be dependent on which one I pick. The trouble is, right now I'm just in the mood to read several books from different authors in the fantasy genre, and one of the first books you're gonna see when you start looking up famous fantasy or fantasy you should read is The Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan.
Yeah.
It is an icon. It's huge.
Yeah.
But this first book is gigantic, and there are 14 books in this series.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is like the definition of a fantasy epic. It's huge, which I'm totally there for. I mean, I've read a lot of long series, but with the first book being this big, I feel like I might want to try to squeeze in a couple others.
Yeah.
Before I get too in depth, because I fear if I get started on that and it's really good, I'm gonna buy the next book, and then I'll be 14 books deep before I start doing anything else. So I picked up Robin Hobb's Assassin's Apprentice, the first book in the Farseer trilogy. And much more manageable size.
Is that still fantasy? Because it sounds like it's like a crime novel.
It is. It is fantasy.
Is it a fantasy crime novel? Do you know?
It is.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and why not both?
Yeah, I hear a lot of
chocolate. Let's have a Reese's.
I hear a lot of cool stuff about Robin Hobb. I guess it's kind of doom and gloom stuff for a lot of this. Not so much like, I mean, I don't know the ending of this book.
Is it dystopian?
Thankfully, and I don't know that it's dystopian. It's just bad things happen to characters, like real bad stuff. I guess is what you have to be prepared for in this.
Yeah.
I don't know any I've not read into many. I just know that this is popular. But I hear his character development is awesome.
What do you think is going to be the turning point between you choosing between the two of them? Do you have one?
You know what? I think what we were talking about earlier with our own writing. I think that's gonna be it. Because I think as of right now, I'm leaning towards Assassin's Apprentice. Because I hear that Robin Hobb does a masterful job of developing his characters.
Yeah.
And I think that could be beneficial for me in this venture.
I'm glad.
Just to see what right looks like, or at least what a lot of people say right looks like. So yeah.
No, that's neat. I'm really glad. You can update us next time on the podcast with which one you chose.
I will. Yeah. Well, I think this is gonna have to be one we do kind of frequently.
Oh yeah.
Because
I'm still reading for school and all that.
Yeah, that too.
So lastly, I recently read Howell by Allen Ginsberg, which is the second time I tried it. And the thing with Howell is it was initially spoken aloud and then was written down, I think. Or it just went through so many changes that it was mostly built around a public performance of it. And, the Beat Poets? like Jack Kerouac, William S.
yep,
Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg. Um, they all were they were high on their own shit. Like to be frank, I don't like swearing on the podcast, but I felt like being blunt because they really are so self-obsessed that it takes you out of it a bit, because they refer to themselves like messiahs, angels, like because they saw themselves as like more daring than previous intellectuals, which in some senses they were. They broke a lot of taboos, and there's some taboos that should have been broken and some that shouldn't have been. Like, it was in the middle of the Lavender Scare, where it was not just, it was intertwined with communism, where, like, I know we talk about it a lot in the podcast, but intersectionality when reading this stuff is important, because the way they treated homosexuals is a similar way that they treated communists. And Allen Ginsberg, on the other hand, beyond that, was a pedophile. Like, maybe not actively, but he was the most famous advocate for pedophiles I've ever heard of. Like, do you know NAMBLA? The North American Man-Boy Love Association?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Fucking figurehead. Like, total,
No
absolute figurehead. So, not good. But he's an important poet, historically. And I felt like I'd be underread if I didn't read Howell. And it's just not good. Like, it's just not well constructed. There's maybe, like, I think I pulled out one quote. Let me see. I apologize for my my frank language. I feel like the poets, the beat poets, would be proud that I'm being so so frank about it, because he's quite vulgar in this. So this was the only real interesting set of lines for me, where it's still not, it's still pretty dense stuff, but it's the part that made the most sense to me. So this is on page, I've got it accidentally blotted out. It was like page 36 or something. I'm with you in Rockland, where we hug and kiss the United States under our bed sheets, the United States that coughs all night and won't let us sleep. That felt very symbolic about how homosexuals were treated in America back then. And while his other sexual preferences aren't valid, that one is, and he sort of obfuscates that by being such an abhorrent person outside of it. But that particular line, coughing all night, keeping them up, forcing them to be unwell, that was powerful for me. But it was so, just so caked into this, weird, they're obsessed with nudity, the guys were, and they were just abhorrent, man. They were, childish and, gross. It's just not my thing, dude. But I'm glad that one quote stood out to me. I'm really, it's sad that my reading material has been way more disappointing than yours lately, because I wish it was better. I was complaining to my parents about in the middle of Sartre. I was just like, God, this is terrible. Oh, I'm having such a bad time right now. That's about it.
Yeah, I do have one more that I forgot. I went to the bookstore today specifically for this book and ended up buying Assassin's Apprentice. I want to read The Black Prism by Brent Weeks.
Did you get it?
They did not have it.
Call ahead.
The man said he hasn't seen it in weeks, but I think, I don't know, I'm probably at this rate just going to order it, but he said they could, order one in for me specifically, but he didn't know what the timeline would be. Well, I think other online sources can probably get it to me pretty quick. but that one looks really interesting. I'm a big fan of cool and interesting and different magic systems in fantasy, and the Black Prism sounds like it has a really awesome one.
Yep.
So that's probably next. If I can get my hands on it, that's probably going to be the one.
All right, sweet. I'll add something just so it's an even number then. So, for the next set of short stories that we do, we're going to do Flannery O'Connor. And I have not read a lot of Flannery O'Connor, and I didn't realize, because she does Southern Gothic literature. It's similar to Raymond Carver, but set in a different place, in a different time. And it is quite racist, the characters are. I don't think she was, personally, but I think the perspective she writes from, it's meant to be a working man's perspective. In a post-constructional or reconstructional era, there's a lot of deep-seated resentment against black people in the South because of his more misplaced hatred that should have been directed at the shady politicians that were messing them over back then. But she wrote this short story called The Geranium, which eventually became Judgment Day. It's about this guy, like two separate titles. It's not the geranium that eventually
Understood.
It's about this guy who moves to New York from Georgia to be with his daughter and is sort of overwhelmed by the world around him, mostly because he's surrounded by black people and is to interact with black people. And it feels like the beginning of this schism between sort of real racism, like real aggressive racism that he had, and then the passive, still dangerous and cancerous sort of racism that his daughter had, where it was like, yeah, I'll live next to a black person, I just won't talk to him or touch him or interact with him, and I'll leave him be. And it's eye-opening that she'd write from that perspective, because generally, while I'll write detestable characters, I don't write racists, and I don't know very many racists, and those that I do, I tend to disagree with on everything that comes to racial politics. And it's interesting to read two characters that I so wholeheartedly disagree with. And the most interesting part of the book is the guy dies. She initially buries him in New York, and then she picks him up and buries him in Georgia. And I wonder if that's meant to be symbolic in terms of how his attitude didn't change. He had moved to New York, but his attitudes remained in the Deep South. And I'm not too sure if that's what Flannery meant, but that's what I took out of it. So while it's not really suitable for the podcast, because it's quite racist, or at least the characters are quite racist, I found a lot of neat things in it. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad I read it.
All right, nice.
All right, that's been Recent Reads.
Recent Reads, the pilot.
Leave your recent reads in the comments below.
Do it.
Do it. We might read them. They might be my recent reads.
We'll even shout you out.
Yeah, well, give us your
and
address.
then you'll be famous too.
Yeah, I'll read anything. You put your social in there, I'll read it. You shouldn't, but it's at your own risk. Boom and Spice. Identity theft advice. Don't put your social online, kids. Thank you, Sheldon.
Thank you, Sheldon, for that last bit.
What's even reading? How to Catch a Tail by Sheldon, last name. By Sheldon, boom, last name.
Sheldon, boom, last name.
Of course. All right. I've been Spice.
I'm Boom.
Keep on reading.
Keep on reading.
Keep on reading.
Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.